Let's start with you are pioneers. You need to know this because this is the first ever in both Americas Summer Institute on Janusz Korczak. So you should feel proud of yourselves. You are really the first of the first. And I'm extremely excited because my introduction to Korczak happened in 1991. So it has been a long way, as you can imagine, and I would never at the time imagine that this is it. I would have a North American Summer Institute on Korczak. Would never dream of that. But it's happening. So I guess, as Korczak said, dare to dream, something come of it. So we dreamed, it happened, and I can only dream for the next step that the word of Korczak would spread all over the world and every Canadian school will start working, thinking about the legacy of this person because then the lives of children would become definitely better, as much as the lives of teachers. Anyways, so my name is Tatiana Tsurlina-Spady. I'm professor at Seattle Pacific University, and I'm invited to teach here at UBC for the Summer Institute. This is my first teaching experience at UBC. I can say I love Canada. So since that time, from 1991 until today, I'm an avid follower of Korczak, and there's so much depth in his legacy and his pedagogy that I never stop learning. And I can tell you I'm still at the beginning. So my word to you is we would never learn everything during these 2 weeks, but we will approach. And Korczak is like an open door. You have to come in, but there's plenty behind the door, and you'll need to go through this. Because of the courtesy of Korczak Association of Canada, you have the books. The books are the first edition of the selected works of Korczak, that is 2 volumes. And the other book is King of the Children by Betty Lifton. And Betty Lifton is the best biographer of Korczak. She was American. I managed to meet with her in person in 1995. She was an incredible person, quite a character. She did a really fundamental study of Korczak. She worked in archives in Israel, in Poland, elsewhere in America, and the book is really well written. I certainly recommend it, and it's really a great book. So these 3 books were republished because of Korczak Association of Canada, which is great by itself, and you get them for free, so please consider reading, okay? This is all because of the courtesy of Janusz Korczak Association of Canada. And it's President Jerry Nussbaum who is covering the expenses of international speakers. So you'll have a chance to meet with really exciting and incredible people. Not only internationally, but professionals from Montreal. So you name it, we'll have it all. The last thing, all my life, I was working as university professor. I was writing a lot, so I have 21 books published and over 50 papers in peer-reviewed journals and chapters, etc. And I was presenting in many, many conferences and was invited as a speaker to different countries. I would like to introduce Dean Frank, who would start our official part of the meeting, please.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. As Dean of the Faculty of Education here at the University of British Columbia, I am delighted to welcome the Honorable Janet Austin, Lieutenant Governor of British Columbia. I'll say a few more words following her honors talk. So.
Yeah, thank you. Oh, I guess I don't exactly need that, do I? Anyway, thank you. Thank you very much. Dean Frank, for your kind invitation. I too would like to acknowledge the Coast Salish peoples, particularly the Musqueam Nation, upon whose traditional territory we gather today. And knowing as I do the importance of the relationship between the Crown and Indigenous peoples, I'll share with you that I've been making an effort to learn a little bit of Sinchothan, which is one of the traditional languages in the territory in the Greater Victoria area where Government House is located. And so I will say, Aitsquaichil Stelata Aikwanis Quananga Hela, which if you know the language, you know my pronunciation is terrible. But what I'm attempting to say is, good day, dear friends. It's wonderful to be among you today, and I mean that most sincerely. I will note as well that I have been inspired by the many Indigenous peoples working hard to provide economic opportunities for their people, to be good stewards of our lands and waters, and to ensure the revitalization of their language and culture. And so I've actually selected reconciliation as one of the key themes of my mandate as Lieutenant Governor. I also want to express my thanks to Inspector Bob Yasui, who is currently with the U.S. Secret Service, but he used to be with the Vancouver Police Department. And Bob is my honorary aide-de-camp today. It's always a pleasure to work with him, even if people sometimes think that he's the Lieutenant Governor. That's kind of my opening line. You know, and you'd be amazed, though, how often it happens where I'll go to an event and I've been doing the job for a year, so not everybody knows me that well. But sometimes people will come up to me and say, can we have a picture? And so I get ready to have my picture taken, and then they give me the phone to take a picture of this one, right? Anyway, it's partly the uniform, and I do make light of it, but I think it's also partly that people don't always expect to find a woman in this role. So that's worth thinking about. I'm also very grateful to Dean Frank for a very kind invitation to join you today, and also want to acknowledge his exemplary leadership as Dean of Education. He shared with me this morning in a very humble way that UBC education faculty is the #1 education faculty in the entire country of 63, which doesn't surprise me, actually, but nonetheless deserves great credit and congratulations. So could we just give him a round of applause for his really exemplary leadership? So, I will also share that as CEO of the YWCA, my previous role, our organization benefited a great deal from the volunteer service of many of the students of Faculty of Education in our school-based youth programs. And I will say they set an extraordinary standard for volunteerism. And they truly are, I think, exemplars for building of civil society. And I think that's something that they owe a great deal to the quality of the education that they receive here. So for all of you who are involved, I thank you. Those of you who know me, and I see a few familiar faces here, but those of you who know me will know that I've spent a large part of my professional and my volunteer life as an advocate for children, for single mothers and children, and providing services for children. So I've been involved with things like advocating for universal child care, high quality and pre and postnatal care for vulnerable populations, for social pediatrics, supporting youth who are transitioning from care, youth programs that address things like cyberbullying, internet safety, healthy relationships, and many others. And we've been privileged to enjoy wonderful partnerships, not only with the Faculty of Education, but with other faculties within UBC, for which I will always be grateful. So when I think of the collaboration between the Korjak Association, so capably led by our dear friend Jerry Nussbaum, and UBC, I feel very strong alignment with the values that I personally ascribe to, and also with the goals that I've set for myself as Lieutenant Governor. So in addition to reconciliation, I've pledged to use my time as Lieutenant Governor to continue to bring profile to many of the social justice issues that I've long been associated with. And of course, the needs and the rights of children will always, always be very high on that list. I want to also applaud the interdisciplinary approach you're taking, and to say how very much my views, my values have been shaped by the work of many distinguished UBC researchers, and I'll include in that the legendary Clyde Hertzman, who I had the privilege of working with on the Council for Early Child Development, and whose groundbreaking work has been so ably succeeded by Dr. Kim Schonert-Reichel. So that group is a group that I've had great pleasure in working with, and I continue to follow and do whatever I can to support what I consider to be truly their splendid work. I'm delighted to see so many distinguished and highly respected names associated with the work of the Summer Institute. I see there was a letter from Hillel Goldman. Is Hillel here? Oh, there you are. And nice to see you. I haven't seen Hillel for years, but it was a real delight to see that you're involved with this, and I wanted to thank you for your leadership and in mobilizing, I think, the UBC community to support the Institute. I'm also very interested to see the involvement of people like Dr. Gilles Julien and Hélène Trudel, whose work I have long admired. I do consider myself to be a proud champion of social pediatrics, not only in my work in the downtown east side with the YWCA, but also through the 6 years that I spent on the board of the Canadian Pediatric Society. So I was absolutely delighted during my last year on the board of the CPS that we put together what I thought was a really excellent strategic plan, which included 5 key themes, 4 of which are all about the social determinants, and one of which is explicitly a focus on social pediatrics. And I was pleased to work with Dr. Chris Locke as well to support the formation of a social pediatric interest group within the structure of the CPS, which has now become a full section. So I think examples like that they're so important. And they're very hopeful, because I think what they do is they provide a systemic model, which is about embedding a culture. So embedding a culture across the whole pediatric community in the country that recognizes the importance of social pediatrics and supports its execution. I recently had the privilege of hosting the Yanis Korczak Association Awards at Government House in Victoria. We did it last year at the legislature, but I was delighted to be able to host at Government House this year, and hearing from Holocaust survivor and poet Lillian Borax-Nemetz, who joins the Institute's list of distinguished teachers this year. I will honestly say that hers was one of the most moving speeches I think I have ever heard. You know, I was deeply touched by her testament to the humanitarian leadership of Dr. Korczak as seen through the eyes of a child survivor, and those, of course, were her eyes. This extraordinary man who repeatedly refused sanctuary to stay with his orphans when the entire population of his orphanage was sent by the Nazis to the Treblinka extermination camp. And I know this is a story that you all will know very well. You know, this is a visionary who reimagined the relationship between children and adults as fully equal, and whose ideas ultimately shaped the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. A man whose extraordinary vision was so far ahead of his time that honestly we are only now just beginning to catch up with him. I thought I would just read this one section that he wrote about corporal punishment, which I find extraordinary, particularly given the time in which it was written. So it is this, and I apologize if you're all so far ahead of me that you know this much better than I, but in what extraordinary circumstances would one dare to push, hit, or tug an adult? And yet it is considered so routine and harmless to give a child a slap or stinging smack or to grab him by the arm. The feeling of powerlessness creates respect for power. Not only adults, but anyone who is older and stronger can cruelly demonstrate their displeasure, back up their words with force, demand obedience, and abuse the child without being punished. We set an example that fosters contempt for the weak. This is bad parenting and sets a bad precedent. Now, how clear and sensible that seems when the child is understood to be an equal. Korczak respected and trusted children enough to facilitate their ability to shape their own decisions and their own laws, and to develop the skills to govern themselves wisely. These skills, I think, are required now, really truly more than ever before, as today's children face an accelerating level of change, complexity, and pressure that I think is perhaps unprecedented. And also, as we see more broadly, new examples of chaos and dysfunction emerging in systems of governance every day around the world. I think, like many of you, I find myself increasingly concerned about the fragility of democracy, about the erosion of trust in our democratic conventions and the public institutions that support them, about the decline of civility in public and political discourse. And so I feel compelled to use my time in office as Lieutenant Governor to promote active engagement of our democracy and civil society, and to build knowledge and knowledge of the systems and functions of government and skill in governing, perhaps most importantly among young people whom we must rely upon to lead government at all levels in the future. So I'm pleased also to share that as Lieutenant Governor, I'm forming a youth advisory council that will work with me on this democracy initiative and also advise me on other initiatives that I'm taking on. Janusz Korczak was a man of great personal courage. He was a visionary, he was a radical thinker, he was a gentle humanitarian, he was a man of love. He sought a revolution in the fundamental relationship between children and adults, and he understood that such a revolution must begin in our relationships with each other and with the children in our lives, in communities, across social barriers, within families, and between generations. His revolution was based in understanding and respect for the potential of every newborn child and every young child, and the necessity of a community of supportive adults to respect and to nurture that potential. He understood that whoever saves just one child saves the whole world. So together, I think, dear friends, we have many worlds to nurture and to save. To all involved in the Institute, I want to thank you for your absolutely, truly splendid work, and I wish you very best wishes for the Summer Institute. You give me hope for a better world. You really do. Thank you.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I'm coming here more often. Thank you very much. That's lovely.
So I'd ask you to please join me in thanking Her Honor very much. And I want to pass along my personal gratitude for both being here and for the advocacy work you do in your role as Lieutenant Governor here in the province of British Columbia and across the nation. I do think I need to share one more tidbit. It's probably important that Lieutenant Governors know these kinds of facts about our faculty. Her Honor was mentioning that this was in the Canadian context. In the global context, and I say it this way to make my point about the movement, that when I arrived 8 years ago, and I say this is not about me, it's about creating space for academics and colleagues to do good work. We were 37th in the globe. The next year we moved to 26th in the globe. The next year we moved to 18th in the globe. I said, okay, Mr. Dean, you can take your foot off the pedal. We're in the top 20 faculties of education in the world. The next year we moved to 9th, tying with Columbia Teachers College. So I share that with you not to be boastful, but to say that we have a wonderful group of academics doing work like the work we're doing here at the Institute in a wide range of activities. I also want to recognize our relationship with the Korczak Foundation. We also have an annual Dean's Lecture Series, which Jerry and I in particularly work on. And this fall we have Murray Sinclair coming to give the annual lecture. You would know that he chaired the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and we're just absolutely delighted that he's joining us in the fall for the Dean's Distinguished Lecture. So thank you very much to the Korczak Foundation and to Jerry for the joint efforts we do together. I also now would like to, I want to say one thing, as Her Honor was giving a bit of quote from Dr. Korczak. Let me say one of my favorite: children are not the people of the future because they are people already. So enjoy your Summer Institute, and let me introduce Jerry Nesbaum to you.
Good morning and welcome to our distinguished guest, our honor, the Honorable Janet Austin, Lieutenant Governor of British Columbia. Welcome to Professor Blair Frank, the Dean of Faculty of Education, Professor Tatiana Tsurilina Spadi, the course instructor, the guest lecturers, some of us are with us today, and all the students and guests. I am delighted to welcome you to this master class, the very first North American course dedicated to Dr. Janusz Korczak and his legacy. On behalf of the Janusz Korczak Association of Canada, I would like to thank their honor for her encouragement and for being our honorary patron. Thank you to Dean Frank for his continuous support and Faculty of Education for co-organizing this course. I would like to acknowledge the long-standing support and cooperation by the BC Representative for Children and Youth and the Social Pediatrics Group and the Society for Children and Youth of BC. A special thank you to Dr. Tsurilina Spadi for designing the course and to all the guest lecturers for sharing your expertise with the class. The guest lecturers bring with them a whole spectrum of child well-being expertise in the academic and professional fields in Canada and across the world. As president of the Janusz Korczak Association of Canada, I am delighted to see this course become a reality, bringing Dr. Korczak's legacy into 21st century. The struggle for children's rights is an ongoing one and has been for over a century. Dr. Janusz Korczak has been at the forefront of the struggle since the beginning, making essential contributions to its substance and direction. As a child's rights pioneer at a time where these rights were not widely recognized, he believed that children's rights should be universal and should be granted to all children, irrespective of their religion, culture, or place of origin. He believed that children brought up in a healthy and happy environment become happy, productive, and creative adults. Dr. Korczak is widely recognized as a visionary innovator in his recognition and affirmation of the intrinsic and universal rights of the child, which almost 50 years after his death became embodied in international law in 1989 United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child. To acknowledge and celebrate his accomplishments in the areas of children's health, education, and children's rights, UNESCO declared 1978 to be the year of Janusz Korczak. Pope John Paul II described Korczak, and here's a quote, as a rare human being, a symbol of religion and true morality. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which has been a lifelong vision of Korczak's. Many of Korczak's ideas formed the basis for creating the Charter, leading him to be considered by many as a father of children's rights. But as important as the passing of the Charter clearly was, we as a society must continue the essential work of making its vision a reality and bringing the promise of children's rights to kids at home and abroad. It is my hope that this course can play a role in that work by breathing life into Dr. Korczak's legacy and the ways in which its spirit endures in the efforts that today are at the frontiers of advocacy for children's rights and the work of making them a reality. You will be hearing from incredible series of speakers whose work carries on the essence of Dr. Korczak's legacy. Dr. Janusz Korczak was active in all the fields represented by our lecturers. He was a pediatrician, an educator, a children's rights activist, a writer, and a poet. He was above all a holistic thinker, approaching the well-being of children from a multitude of angles in order to care for the whole child. One of the goals of this course is to capture the essence of Dr. Korczak's holistic thinking by bringing together people who can collectively integrate the range of approaches that are needed to truly stand up for children's rights. Dr. Korczak was much more than a theoretician. For 30 years, Dr. Korczak managed an experimental and very innovative orphanage where he was able to put his theories into practice. In a mindful way, he put the governance of the orphanage into hands of children. He found a balance between caring for and protecting children and encouraging their participation. He did it by focusing on a dialogue with children that listened to their voices and took their opinions seriously. He looked for ways to help children express their views, to be involved in decision-making in the orphanage, and to be active members in their society to the greatest possible extent. Some of the tools Dr. Korczak developed to facilitate these processes included an entirely child-run system of parliament, a court, and a newspaper, among others, which you will hear about in greater details in this course. Now, almost a century later, we will be hearing about other concrete ways in which children are being put at the center of their own well-being in a way that embodies the essence of Korczak's philosophy and practice. Korczak was motivated by one guiding principle. Children need to be respected and loved, and their voices need to be heard. Korczak was a humanitarian, an educator, and a pediatrician. He was a children's advocate. But more than anything else, he was a friend of the children. For the past 2 decades, the Janusz Korczak Association of Canada has been working to promote the legacy of Dr. Korczak, translating his books and writings to make them available to educators and scholars, but most importantly, to highlight the relevance of his works and teachings for confronting current issues in children's rights. Over the past several years, we have organized a series of lectures with the goal of bringing together people from various professions and disciplines who do the work of children's rights to facilitate Dr. Korczak's holistic approach. We're able to bring together pediatricians, lawyers, social workers, and educators around the issues of children's well-being. We organize lectures focused on the rights of Aboriginal children, which is a pressing issue in Canada and in British Columbia in particular, where Aboriginal children make up such a disproportionate part of those in government care. As we co-organized the Summer Institute, inviting leading practitioners and scholars from Canada and around the world, the hope was to take another large step in bringing Korczak's legacy to the challenges of 21st century, at a time when we believe it's more relevant than ever. I'm delighted that you are all here, and I hope that the course will be a big success. Thank you.
Is responsible for the fabulous work that the YWCA has done over the years, and also the person I think I mentioned who really led the social pediatric interest group within the CPS. And I'd written this in my notes and I went off script. So I just wanted to correct that and just to say, you know, what a marvelous marvelous example of leadership we have in Chris. And also, one more thing to Dean Frank.